Thank you for joining us for Perspectives on Organizations' DEI efforts. We are excited today to have all of you with us. And I am Beth Stuebe. I'm the Director of Publications and Press for ILTA, and I'm joined by two of my favorite ILTAns. This is Tracie McCray. She is a staff member and DEI member. And this is Canaan Himmelbaum. He is a valued and very welcome member of our DEI Task Force. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you
for having us.
Well, as we walk through this Perspectives on Organizations' DEI efforts, I want to talk a little bit about this. Canaan, you really kind of changed over from practicing attorney to business development to consulting to a bunch of other kind of cool stuff with us. Can you talk to me a little bit about your perspectives on organizations and DEI?
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate you having me here today. I'm sorry I can't be in person in the future, but hopefully this will be helpful to those watching. It's interesting going through law school, obviously, and then, finding the initial stages of my DE&I experience, actually D&I, the E was not included until many years later. But, really getting a grasp on that with the, Black Student Union, with the Jewish Student Union, with all the other things that were available to us in law school was really the beginning for me when it came to diversity and inclusion. And so that, the way you're treated in that world, obviously, is you're a student, right? And so you're always valued, your opinion is valued, your words are valued. And then you move into the practice of law, right? I worked for a big law firm, and oftentimes in the early, I want to say, mid to 2005, 2006, there wasn't this big push back in law firms for diversity and inclusion, or at least it wasn't at the forefront as it is today. And so my opinions and thoughts coming from law school to have a diverse and inclusive workforce were not always listened to, right? Especially as a young associate. And so I always feel like if law firms can take that into consideration, is that, we're dealing with many different generations, right? Many different ways that people feel about it, is that to allow people to have a voice, create a diversity, equity, inclusion committee. And then 6 years into my career, I went in-house with a corporation. I was an in-house lawyer, right? And so there's a different experience, right? How does the corporation look at diversity, equity, and inclusion? And at that time in 2007, 2008, the market was falling. So I don't think that diversity and inclusion was the biggest thing, but it was really along the hiring practices, right? And so as the person who oversaw employment law, one of the biggest things for me was spending time with human resources, right? Spending time with them to go through that. And then I changed over into the e-discovery world. I'm with Consilio, and I've been there for about 10 years. I've been doing e-discovery consulting and sales for 12. That's really where the stronger impact came in, right? So how do we do things where we're aligned with our customers, our internal resources, the people we're recruiting? And I can tell you, I'm very proud of Consilio's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. The word equity will soon be added, so you'll see a press release on that. But then as part of this, I built out something for one of my large scale clients on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then I was also, by virtue of being accepted and going through the interview process, accepted into the ILTA DEI Task Force. And so that has been a really great growth where everybody is super supportive, right? But I think it's our mission now too, to really share with each and every one of the people that's listening in and outside of that, like how we can help their law firms and corporations continue to grow with us here at ILTA and the DEI Task Force. So I hope that's helpful. Just a really different feeling and perspective, right, from each of those different areas of my life. And I feel that I'm most valued and heard in the Consilio corporate structure, because we do value when we're recruiting, when we're talking to our folks, when we're staffing a team for our clients, that it should be a diverse, equitable and inclusive group of people working on each of our clients. And that's something we report on as well. So you're also held to the metrics, whereas I think in the past it was a nice to have. It's now a need to have.
I think that nice to have versus need to have is something we talk about a lot internally. That's a perfect segue. Tracie, you've had some really cool, as we've talked, offline, as we've talked as friends and as colleagues at different meetings, at different events, and for DEI Task Force, we've talked a lot about the places you've been in your career. You've done a lot of really cool things, and you've been in a lot of really cool places. How does our DEI Task Force compare to working in forensics, compared to working in some of the other places you've worked before?
It's an interesting question. At the university level, like Canaan, it's a very wide open time to explore and grow in your identity development, and that's nurtured in the college level. And then you go out into the professional workforce, and your identity development, as far as whether you are working on white racial identity development, Asian American identity development, LGBTQ identity development, that's not necessarily fostered in the professional world, nor was it at my old organization, but not necessarily because forensics and science don't value DE&I efforts, but simply they're more science based, and sometimes that's just not on their radar. So I wasn't able to make as big of an impact as perhaps I'm able to now at ILTA, with the DEITF, the task force that is going to be becoming a full committee. Pretty proud to be a part of that, as well as working the DEI initiatives into the entire event landscape and making sure that there's diversity throughout everything that I can touch.
As we kind of close this conversation out, a question for both of you. How do you think ILTA's organizations, from our partner side to our firm sides, can make market strides to help an organization really incorporate DEI into everything they do?
That's a great question. I think they can look to our DEI task force as a resource, right? I know that we're posting articles and weekly updates for people to reach out and be a part of that. I think them knowing that we exist is a good thing, but I also think that in their own organizations, right, whether it's a law firm or a corporation or another service provider, vendor, partner, whatever it may be, is to take that seriously, right? Because the important part is wanting to create a culture where people feel included, they feel that they're adding value, and they feel like they're in a diverse workforce that brings different opinions to the table, right? So Tracie, I don't know how that plays, from your perspective, but I can certainly tell you, in my world, one of the things, and with all the competition in the e-discovery space, that keeps me at Consilio is their ability to care about the individual.
And I think that one of the things that ILTA can definitely offer is connections to companies like Consilio, or one of our other panelists, Vanessa with Flagstar, has a very robust DEI program. But these resources exist, and law firms and corporate legal departments and business partners, our associate and industry participants, don't need to reinvent the wheel. That's one of the primary purposes that ILTA exists, is to make these kinds of things easier for our member organizations. And so just remember that ILTA is here and can help you with that.
Guys, thank you for joining me. This was a quick idea about what we can do to change the way organizations view DE&I and how we can help them. Our task force is here. You're both great resources, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.